Hey, JK here. And I want to thank you for sharing part of your day with me. So, week 12 had a little bit of everything. Some teams that were finding their rhythm and getting hot, teams that were finding life after starting the year off abysmal, a few injury concerns, and some more call-ups, which is always exciting, not only for us as fans and fantasy players, but also for their teams, their families, and especially that player. The teams that are finding their rhythm and getting hot are the Reds. They are on a tear for the last 2 weeks. They have some of their key players playing at the top of their game. They had some of their call-ups, or their main call-up, doing crazy things, batting .300 and showing his absurd speed. Their pitching is their main downfall. And with news that Hunter Greene might be out until August, that just is a huge blow to that rotation, because some of the guys that have been pegged as mainstays in their rotation, such as Graham Ashcraft, Nick Lodolo, they've not been performing well. In addition to the excitement of Elly De La Cruz coming up and Encarnacion Strand in the waiting wings, Joey Votto is finally back with the team, and he started off hot with some home runs. I think he's going to settle in. I don't think he's going to be producing like old, but he's going to produce, and more than anything, provide a veteran presence in that locker room, especially with some of the guys who are in there that are young, such as India and Steer, De La Cruz. Another team finding some life is slowed down as of recent, but the Oakland Athletics. Obviously, the main piece in that entire organization is Esteury Ruiz with 40 stolen bases at this point in time. So talking about him being on pace for 80 plus stolen bases, that'll be the first time in 30 plus years, but it's exciting for the Oakland Athletics. Moving to injuries, some scary stuff. Like I mentioned before, Hunter Greene, with his issue potentially being out until August. Shane McClanahan had some discomfort last week in his start. He is expected to start this week, but still, it's very scary when you think of Springs already being out for the Rays. The issues with Tyler Glasnow he's had over the last few seasons. Taj Bradley potentially being limited in his innings this year. The Rays definitely are going to have to work their magic with their rotation and utilize that bullpen. Merrill Kelly was diagnosed with a blood clot in his leg. There's no timetable for his return, but that's very scary. Obviously hoping he comes back, not only for my fantasy team purposes, but just for his health and safety purposes. And finally, Brandon Woodruff, there was a report that he wouldn't be back until maybe August, and even at that, he would be limited, which makes sense after being out for such a period of time. So I will probably, unless it's a keeper league, potentially look to drop him. If it is a keeper league and I have the IL spots available, I might shoot to try to trade for him, because when he's on. He's one of the top pitchers in Major League Baseball for a team that has a history of having some good pitchers. And especially as of recent, Corbin Burns is one of the main ones, with Brandon Woodruff also in that rotation. That'll be a nasty 1-2 punch. So some of these injuries are just really bogging us down, not only as fantasy players, but also as fan bases. Enough about the negative injuries. Let's move on to the fantasy baseball recaps. We're going to start with the Cheese Weasels. At one point in time this week, because of a complete game shutout by Joe Ryan, that boosted me a good bit up in the points. I've regressed a little bit due to a litany of losses coming from my pitchers. I am currently sitting in 5th place with 107 points. Looking at the stats, I'm very close to moving up in points in categories such as hits, RBIs, and walks. This week's adds and drops are very repetitive because I would add a player and then drop them the next day, trying to focus on certain categories, especially pitcher-wise, trying to get those wins and extend my lead in the strikeouts, but also in effect losing and hurting my whip and my ERA. But some of the ads this week, which you will hear the names later in the drops as well, included Freddie Peralta, Pablo Lopez, Jake Fraley, Bryce Miller, Seth Lugo, and Danny Colon. Some of the drops also include Justin Verlander, Jose Alvarado, JD Martinez. That was a mistake. And I immediately paid for it when he hit 2 home runs. Jake Fraley, Bryce Miller, Freddie Peralta, and Pablo Lopez. Again, I'm very close in some categories, so hopefully next week I'll be able to report that I've jumped at least a few points with those categories, maybe even a place or two in the standings. Next, we're going to move to my Kent Murphy Dingers. It was another week where it came down to Sunday starters, resulting in either winning, losing, or tying in this matchup. I decided against starting Hunter Brown on Sunday against the Dodgers. I didn't think it was a good matchup, and I didn't want to run the risk of losing the whip category for a chance to win the wins category. It worked out for me because Hunter Brown did not factor into the decision for that game. I won the whip, I lost the wins, but it came out as a tie, 5 categories to 5 categories. That allowed me to stay in third, stay in second overall in the division, and maintain at least a half game lead over the person in fourth. Some of the individuals that helped me get to that tie included Matt Olson with 5 home runs, Bryson Stott and Esteury Ruiz with 3 stolen bases each, and Scott McGough with 3 saves this week. I was able to add newly called up catcher for the Pirates, Henry Davis. Also, the newly entrenched co-closer, Adbert Alzolay for the Cubs, and Mauricio Dubon, utility infield for the Astros. I dropped Tim Anderson. What a fall from grace. At this point in time, he's hitting about .230, still has not hit a home run, and is very limited in what else he's done on the field. I also dropped Jake McCarthy and Henry Davis. Transitioning to Fantrax, this is a very frustrating league for me, mostly because of my pitchers, as I've mentioned in multiple weeks past. As you can guess, this week was another loss for me. The score this week was 432 to 378. Currently sitting in 9th place at 4-8. Looking ahead to the playoff picture, the top 6 teams make it. I'm only 3 games behind the individual who sits in 6th place. With 9 weeks left, I really feel confident I'll be able to do that. I think the most important thing for me moving forward is to look at matchups. I can only start 13 pitchers per week. This week, while Merrill Kelly did get me 24 points in his first start of the week, he got me 1 point in the second start. Would they have won me the game? No. Would it have made it closer? Absolutely. Some other guys that just did not perform well for me included Dalton Varsho. Throughout the week, he got me 1 point. And Lamont Wade, though he was injured and sat out the first half of the week, he only got me 7 points. Compare that to Jock Peterson and Ronald Acuna, who got me 35 points each. That's very sad. This week I added Jock Peterson and Brian Wu. Both of them have produced well for me this week, and I think they'll stay on my team moving forward. The drops included Tim Anderson, who again was not doing anything for me. Finally dropped Kyle Manzardo and Ben Lively. As we head over to my ESPN leagues, Russell My Gym Jams has been a pretty frustrating team for me this year. This week was a loss. 8 categories to 6 categories to 2 categories. I also played against the person in last place this week. I also lost position in the rankings, sitting in 7th with a record of 73, 88, and 31 overall. I need 6th spot to make playoffs, but I'm about 10 games behind the person ahead of me. I've got to make better decisions with this team, especially the adds and drops, which surprisingly this week there were none for this league. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I think the worst part about this week was I was actually leading 10 categories to 5 categories to 1 going into Sunday. So it was a meteoric collapse. That goes to show can turn on a dime. Some of the contributors in this league, which weren't really a whole lot, but Nate Lowe ended up having 7 walks for me. Bryson Stott had 3 stolen bases too, and Max Scherzer got me 2 wins and 16 strikeouts in his 2-start week. Now we're going to move on to a more successful team, the South Harmon Institute of Technology, which came in with a win, a narrow win, but a win this week. 8 categories to 7 categories to 3 categories. I should have won by more. I'm still sitting second in my division and 4th overall, so that's good. However, I have dropped from single-digit games behind first place in my division to now 10 games behind in my division. So, some ground to make up. I'm still staying in a good spot, but have some ground to make up. This week, the main contributor was Matt Olson. He had 5 home runs, 9 RBIs. Tyler Glasnow, while he was not able to grab a win for me, he did grab me in his 2-start week 19 strikeouts, so that's awesome. Braxton Garrett also had 1 start and was able to grab me a win and a 13 strikeout game, so happy with those 2 young stud pitchers. The only ad drop for this league was dropping Brandon Nimmo, which burnt me because he had a few home runs last week, and picking up Bailey Ober. He had a great matchup with the Tigers this past weekend and did not do as well as I thought he should have. So, going back to the segment where I tell you individuals who I am going to be looking to add or players who I think you should be adding, I really think that this player for the Cubs who's coming back from the IL, he just had his 3rd rehab start. I think he's going to have another one here soon, is Jose Quintana. He's looking good through 3 starts in the minors. Again, 1 more coming up just to hone some skills. He has a track record of being a pretty decent pitcher. The Cubs are doing a pretty good job at scoring runs this year. They have had some success with some other starters on their team, including Marcus Stroman, and having that co-closer with some pretty good setup men. I think Jose Quintana coming back from the IL will be a pretty good add. If you have spots on your IL, put him there. Maybe have a wait-and-see game, but overall I think he's going to be a good add. Another pitcher I have for you to add is a reliever. For the year, he has a sub-1 whip. For the past month, his whip has been .37. Over the past month, his ERA has been .55. Josh Sborz is electric. He's the main setup guy in front of Will Smith on a dominant team in Texas. And I think if there's an injury to Smith, he'll take over, and I don't think he's going to look back. I don't think he's going to give it back to Smith. Sborz should be available in your league. Pick him up. He's going to get you holds, going to get you the eventual save, and he's definitely going to get you the case. Well, that's a wrap for Week 12. I hope your fantasy weeks went well and that they continue to go well. I'll see you back here for Week 13. This has been J-Cake, and I want to thank you for spending part of your day with me.